Happy Halloween week, everyone, and welcome back to Collect Your Thoughts, the Bentonville Counseling Collective's podcast. We thought that in honor of everyone's favorite spooky holiday, this week we could talk about masks. Batman masks, Joker masks, Friday the 13th. No, obviously not those masks, but maybe more relevant, the masks and behavior changes that we use each and every day to gain acceptance, to find belonging or safety, and even grease the wheels of our social interactions.
In this episode, we will explore a little of how and when we choose to wear different masks, the code switching we do to integrate ourselves in different situations, the benefits and tolls that this behavior can take, and some ways to reflect to make sure you're not going overboard. Stay tuned.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Jason LeCompte, a licensed professional counselor and clinical supervisor.
And I'm Sean Millhouse, licensed professional counselor.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing okay, man.
I've got my bro persona on, I guess, today.
Well, I mean, I guess with the subject, I tried to come mask today. Did it work?
Mask, like mask for mask, like
That's not what we're talking
like
about.
extra masculine. No, that's not. I didn't spell it. Maybe I spelled it that way in the notes. No. You're such a dork. No, of course. We're talking about the masks that we wear. And
We
code
are?
switching.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, bro.
Oh,
Yeah.
shit, man. I need to get some chew.
Sean has his dork dialed up today. I can see the meter on
This
the
is
side.
how it always
Everybody
is. I just choose when to
I love
let
it.
come out.
I know. It's fun. It's fun and
It's
it's silly.
something.
It's you at your I think your most fun when you're
Okay.
being silly. Yeah.
Good deal.
Yeah. So yeah, we're talking about masks and code switching, which kind of goes hand in hand, like how we talk, what we say, the way we show up in different places, different relationships, different situations. It's kind of essential, but also can be really taxing when we have to rely on it for things like safety or comfort or stuff like that. So I think this is a great topic. I know you and I've talked about this like in other ways in other episodes, but also just other conversations that we've had. I think our
Yeah.
episode with Asher, we talked a little bit about code switching when we were talking about, what were we talking about that episode? I can't remember what that one was
We
about.
were talking about masculinity.
We're talking about masculinity. That's right. Yeah. Oh, that's funny because we started with mask, mask for mask. Nice. So yeah. So maybe, maybe it's important to talk a little bit about like, just like maybe how we're defining. You want to go? Let's go there first.
Yeah,
just to make
let's
it
do
to make it simple. So we, as therapists, psychologists, we define masks as the psychological and social faces that we wear to navigate different contexts. So like I talked about, like we may show up in one way at our parents' house and may show up in a different way at our friend's house or with a partner, or difference between work and personal, the stuff we choose to talk about, right? Those kinds of things. We also define code switching as kind of like we said, hand in hand, shifting behaviors, language, and mannerisms, depending on the audience or the environment. But the commonality is that we all do this to some degree. But as we're going to talk about a little bit more, like a little bit more specifically for people with minority identities, especially in Western culture, the stakes are often a lot higher in those different situations. What kind of I mean, I know you have experience, but like you have like a little anecdote, a little side story you can tell us about, or maybe just some awareness you have, Sean, about like when you switch.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like what we alluded to with the masculinity episode is it definitely for me, I find myself at least personally turning it up if I'm around somebody that is a manual labor because I feel like that's such I think we discussed that last time,
Mm.
like,
Oh
with
yeah.
masculinity is how,
Uh-huh.
like, I see that as sort of like the ultimate masculinity is being somebody that's doing something with their hands
Right.
or, you know, definitely, the just the classic masculine tropes of guys with deep voices who stand firm in themselves and just like less expression in their face and their voice. And
Sure.
so then I find myself wanting to make sure that I don't sound like some little just to be just to be completely shitty, a little bitch boy, because that's like the
Yeah.
the you know the shitty internalized homophobia and
Okay. Yeah.
crap that I have contended with is wanting to
Yeah.
feel more masculine. And so yeah, that's at least how it shows up probably the most often for me is not wanting to seem like I'm just some I don't know. It's really toxic. It's this thing of like I don't want people to just automatically assume that I'm gay by the way that I speak, which
Sure.
is shitty in so many ways, but it's definitely something I try to like work on. But
Yeah.
I also like speaking in a deeper voice because most people make fun of me because I get excited and I start getting higher and higher. And of course
It's
they're like,
true.
"Oh, that's so funny," and I'm like it's not on purpose, you know.
Yeah,
All
sure,
right,
sure.
so
But
that
that's
was
really you, right? That's authentically you when you do get excited and your voice does go up and red.
apparently it is, yeah.
It's not something you have to try to do, is my point. It's not a
No,
mask that you're
no.
putting on. Yeah.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I love this topic for lots of different reasons, but biggest reason that I love it is that it speaks to one of my values, which is authenticity.
Mm,
That's something that I've identified and I work to strive really, really hard to be in as many contexts as possible. And so I still do wear different masks in different places and still code switch, but I try not to do it as profoundly as maybe I did 20 years ago, right?
yeah,
When I felt like when maybe I had more internalized self-hatred or I had more a sense of unsafe being in different places with different people or whatever it might be.
yeah,
So that's what I feel like you're describing, right? What do you
for
think you're
sure.
navigating there? If you don't mind being a little vulnerable, like what are you navigating when you drop your voice or try and show up more masculine?
Oh, I mean, I think I wanna fit in. I wanna
You want to fit
feel
in?
like
Yeah.
I'm in normal setting,
Mm.
and so it feels safer to like
Sure.
and especially like I'm a big guy, I'm a tall guy. And so I think like I then feel like I need to fill out the rest of that stereotype
That
of
stereotype?
I
Yeah.
need to also, I can't be like, hey girl, what are you doing? Not that I sound like that either, but like sometimes I feel like I do. But yeah, so I mean I think it's a lot about safety, which I think is a lot what this topic is about, is
It
like
is. Yeah.
feeling like I also think like guys like I hate to say it again, but I think classically heterosexual men, whether or not you can gauge if they're comfortable with other sexualities or whatever, they tend to they tend to chill out a little bit if you also show up in a way that's like, I'm just another dude, man. And so
Okay.
it creates this like I'm disarming you, but I'm mostly protecting myself because you're not thinking like, oh, here's this queer guy that I have to
Yeah.
like interact with. And,
Right.
because we're always just trying to come on to straight guys left to right. Like all I want to do is, go after Butch Dave coming in to repair my air conditioning
Yep.
every time. Yeah, I'm
Yep.
so into that.
And
So
if you out yourself, then you're immediately going to start hitting on him and try and
I just
turn him
can't control
gay and
myself. It's part of
just
the gay agenda.
uncontrollable. Yep. And then we
Yeah.
sprinkle our pixie dust on, and then they turn gay,
And they turn gay and it's a whole thing.
and it's their biggest fear.
It come true.
It's their
Yeah.
biggest fear come true.
Mhm. What
Yeah.
about
So
with you? I'm curious about for you.
this is so yeah. I feel like I I wouldn't. Well, okay. The one I shared, I think, in that episode about masculinity was my husband calls me out occasionally in similar situations. Remember the story
Mhm.
where it will be maybe the same thing, right? Where there's somebody who I perceive as very masculine or very butch, or it could be someone in the service industry. It doesn't matter, like whatever that is. but he accuses me sometimes or calls me out for dropping my voice at like to a lower register. And in this moment, like I don't even think if I did that, I would be like down here. In this moment, like this is where my voice is naturally. But
Yeah.
when similarly, when I get excited, I get expressive and it goes up and I'm like, oh my God. And then I can out myself, if you will. Right. So that's one context where I think other people notice it, is where maybe I do drop it a little bit, or I get a little bit more serious, or I get a little bit more like direct or something
Mhm.
along those lines. And you're right, though. It comes from that internalized place of like, I wasn't safe to be myself for so long. And so I still automatically code switch so that I show up a little bit more safely in that
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
What I will say, credit that I will give myself on this front, is now I look for opportunities in as many situations as possible to say things like my husband.
Mm.
I don't say spouse anymore. I used to say spouse to sort of leave a little bit of gay area.
So
Gray.
you can't
I
even hide
can't
it.
even. That's what I'm saying. A little bit of gray area, right?
Yeah.
But now I look for opportunities to mention him by name or by title, my husband, so that I am more authentic in that moment. But
Yeah.
that's something that I've had to grow into. Like and I still, when I do it, there's still 2% of me that goes, oh, better look out. Like he might
Mhm.
turn on you. Haven't had that experience yet, but the fear's still in there.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how I think I navigate it, or that I'm aware of it, try and use it. Yeah. So are you then like, are you suppressing? Is that part of what you feel like you're doing, is suppressing? That's what I feel like that's the way it shows up for me, is maybe I'm
Oh, for
suppressing
sure. Yeah.
my expressiveness, which I think it's translated as queerness in our culture.
Yeah.
But I think I'm also accentuating something that arrives pretty naturally for me. It just becomes a little bit more forefront. So
Yeah.
yeah. Is that similar for you?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like,
Yeah.
I definitely wanna come off as, like, I don't know, there's something in me that's like that trope of coming and sounding a certain way
Yeah.
and presenting a certain way too, like, I'm less expressive, I try to look like I give no shit, like,
Mhm.
it's really cosplaying the
Yeah.
stereotype of a straight dude.
Sure. Yeah.
Especially
Yeah.
a straight dude that like I really who like works in warehouses and it's like I just took, just went in the shitter, like
Right.
so
Whatever all that, yeah, sort of
not that I
stereotypical.
want to be
Yeah.
that dude that's like, don't go in the shitter. I just but like
Yeah. Wait a minute. Let it air out. Whatever.
that
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the gross part of masculinity where I'm like,
Uh-huh.
never mind, I'm gay.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, take it back. Yeah.
So what about like some obviously, unidentified, but like client stories or anecdotes? Like you have anybody who has described that you can remember, like this, maybe some of the stakes that are involved in situations like this, where they feel like they can't be their authentic selves?
Hmm. I mean, definitely for sure. I would say I mostly see it with my non-binary and trans clients.
Mm.
Like, I would
Mhm.
definitely say, especially if they're newer or they're newer in the beginning of expressing that part of themselves,
Mhm.
part of the journey.
Yeah.
And so there is that awkwardness of they're noticing that I'm cutting my hair now or that I'm wearing boy clothes or
Mhm.
um that I've decided to start wearing skirts or whatever. And so I think with that, there is definitely a vulnerability of, especially, in our current climate, like a real sense of fear of
Yeah.
having scary stuff happen to them.
Es- Especially for trans and non-binary folks. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say, I think too, like with at least the queer folks that come to me, I will say, like, I guess this is for as much as I struggle to find progress in a lot of things right now, I definitely think most of the people that come to me are pretty fully formed in their queerness, at least in their everyday lives, it's
Sure.
usually more of the, like, underneath the surface stuff that
Hmm.
maybe they still mask in certain compartments of their lives, like maybe with their family of origin
Sure.
or at work that sometimes comes up, but most people, I feel like, are living pretty boldly as themselves in that
That's so
way.
great to hear that. I
Who
love that.
Yeah, I mean, it
Yeah.
definitely wasn't like that when I first began my career, for sure,
Right.
when I was working with queer folks. I mean, a lot of times people wouldn't even mention that in the intake, and it would just be something like, it wouldn't be in their paperwork. I'd
Yeah.
eventually find out by my questioning,
Sure.
and that is, again, that's also, like, I think to protect themselves of, like, will this person treat me differently seeing on the form that I
Sure.
identify as gay or that I have a partner that is same sex or queer or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, when you started, that was like 40 or 50 years ago. So, I mean, times were
Correct.
really, really
And
different
I've
back
looked
then.
pretty damn good for about 70, so
You too.
thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
So the stakes are real for a lot of folks, especially minority identified folks, not just LGBTQ, but also anyone with brown skin, right? Or
Yeah.
something other than European white. Like there's definitely different situations where they may have to hide or accentuate different traits that they have, different manners of speaking, different even like I've had clients describe how their accent, if they have
Mm.
accented they speak in accented English, if English is a second language or third or more,
Yeah.
that they will sometimes face discrimination or face a different kind of judgment, that maybe just the average white English speaking American would not face.
Mm.
Um, and that's tough to hear because it's not exactly something you can just snap your fingers and switch, right?
No.
So
No.
you're showing up, trying to show up as your authentic self, and then you're being treated differently or as the
Yeah.
other. Yeah. All right. So obviously there's stakes there for, I mean, anyone with minority identity, but there's also stakes for, I mean, just the average everyday Joe too, right? Do you ever
Absolutely,
have
for anyone.
for anyone? So what are some, can you think of an example of just some average Joe client who says they may have to mask or code switch for some
I
reason?
I actually, it's not a client, but a friend of mine who listens
Oh
to
yeah.
the podcast. Hey,
Mm,
I'm not gonna say names just in case they don't want this part to be expressed that it's
sure.
them, but they have said, like, they themselves are a heterosexual male, and they a cisgender male at that, and they mentioned, like, when we had our masculinity episode, they were like, I feel that pressure too. One thing is that he's also somebody that's not like he wasn't this super athlete. He, it has maybe some more of those nerd stereotypes that, like, I think, that I'm definitely drawn to in my friends, but that in general popularity, especially when we were growing up, was, I think, frowned upon much more than it is now. And
Sure.
so I think there was this notion for him that, yeah, like, when I'm around other guys, I better also say the same things and talk the same way.
Yeah.
And so there is a realness that I think a lot of guys don't even know they're doing code switching to heterosexual
Mhm,
men,
mhm.
cisgender men. And maybe that's part of what this episode, if there are any, hopefully, at least there's some that maybe are, that
Yeah,
maybe they can recognize, like, oh yeah, when I, like, get home to, like, my wife or my roommates or whatever,
yeah,
like, I'm not afraid to be silly and dance around and, giggle and things like that.
yeah.
And, like, we know that all people do that, but in, outside culture, it's like, unless you have this big hearty laugh and are drinking a beer and talk about sports, it seems like, and I think it's also tarnished, not tarnished, that's a harsh word, but it's not helped by, we're in Arkansas. So, like, we have a lot of very,
There's a subculture here for
country.
sure.
There's definitely a
Oh, yeah,
country
yeah,
hunter, like, can't wait for November when it's hunting season,
right.
that kind of vibe. And
It's
yeah,
October actually, but that's okay.
it's
Uh,
October. I thought it was November.
deer season has I just from what I know anecdotally,
Deer
I'm not a
hunting, though?
deer hunting. Yeah, it starts in October.
Oh, I thought there
Yeah.
was, like, because I swear to God, I had, like, I remember having younger clients who were like, Oh, yeah, we get out of school on this day because it's, like, the first official day of hunting
Oh,
season.
weird. Okay.
Yeah, and, like, they'll
Maybe
take, like, a
maybe
week
turkey?
off.
Turkey
So,
hunting?
maybe
I
it's
don't know.
turkey hunting.
Yeah, I
Maybe
don't
you're
know.
right. I don't
Yeah.
know. Obviously, I'm not one, so I could
Critter
be very
hunting. We're
wrong.
neither of us are. Neither of
There's
us
probably some
hunt
hunter listening going,
critters.
"These idiots."
Yeah, I'm sure that's happening. Yeah.
We have lots of for all of our hunter listeners, hey.
Hey guys, thanks for tolerating our lack of knowledge about your. Yeah, it's
We'll have a
yeah.
whole episode
So
on hunting one of these days. Never.
right,
That
exactly.
I won't be on.
You can part no.
I don't
Let's
want
just
to.
we don't want to. I don't want to be on it. I don't want to be on
No, I
it. Yeah,
can barely
yeah,
handle the fact that I'm not a vegetarian. I feel terrible, so I don't need to have it more up close and have to face my hypocrisy, you know?
yeah, yeah.
So, anyway,
Oh, it's funny.
I
I remember
digress.
I remember learning in graduate school about the concept of microaggressions.
Mm,
And this is something that we don't talk a lot about in like popular culture. I know as therapists we may talk about it more often than other people, but just to kind of draw out a little bit of like the costs, right? The cost of masking. So when I learned about this, and I definitely experienced this myself, an example of a microaggression is when somebody makes an offhand comment or maybe a direct comment that's sort of denigrating to a piece of your identity that you're not necessarily out about. And
yeah.
so it could be something about the smell of your food, but this is culturally like ethnically a favorite dish for you. And so you're
Mhm.
eating just your favorite food, and then somebody makes an offhand comment about the smell or whatever. So it stings just a little bit, right? Kind of gets in underneath. So an example of like not an overt aggressive behavior, but maybe a microaggression. So the cost, right? The
Yeah.
cost of having to filter, the cost of having to mask or code switch intentionally. I remember doing this in my retail life when I wasn't fully out or fully out to everyone. There were times when I had to switch in my head. If I was dating a man, I would have in my head kind of walking through moment to moment, I would have to say they or them to sort of
Mhm.
leave this vague, right? But that takes effort. That takes
Yeah.
energy. And so when we have to mask, we have to code switch where we feel like it's to protect ourselves, there is a cost, an energetic cost, but then there's also other costs. Do you have an example of something, another way that tax we have to pay?
Oh, yeah, I mean, like, just that brought back memories when you were talking about
Mhm.
referring to people you were dating as, like, they. I remember in high school, like, even though I was still figuring out my sexuality, I knew I liked guys, and I don't like lying. I hate lying.
Uh-huh.
And so I would say, "Oh, they're, blah, blah, blah," I don't wanna like, I wouldn't tell people who I had crushes on. I would
Right.
make sure to do as much as I could not to say her or she
Mhm.
because I didn't wanna feel like I was lying, but also, like, basically omission, right? And so everybody knew my
These
bullshit.
days, like everyone's that's like a key indicator of someone hiding that information, right?
It can be, but I've been thrown off many times. I've had
Well, okay.
people,
Yeah,
like, who say and I'm like, "Oh, are they, like, about to tell me that, like, maybe they're developing feelings for somebody of a
sure.
different sex, or whatever, that
Yeah,
maybe," and then, like, they say "her," and I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, maybe they're just being more gender neutral," which is also becoming more and more common.
true. Yeah, that's
Um,
true. Yeah,
so it's like, it's hit or miss, I think, depending
yeah,
on various factors.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I appreciate that. I feel like, I mean, you and I both experienced the sort of cultural shift in the '90s and the early 2000s of more queer acceptance, and so I so appreciate that I was able to come out and start to express myself and live my authentic life during that time, so that
Mhm.
20 years later I could really feel grounded and the word that I use a lot with clients is integrated. I feel like all of the sides of my personalities, the different ways that I show up, I can choose to out myself more often now, right? I
Yeah.
just feel safer. I feel more accepted. Even now, as things feel like they're shifting in the other direction, unfortunately, I
Mhm.
still feel safe enough or maybe bold enough in my identity and myself to be able to be silly with somebody who I think is, very masculine, or to talk about how I don't really have a religious community that I belong to. And down here in the South, that's like a big deal. I'm essentially outing myself again, right? As
Yeah.
a agnostic or whatever. I've had other sort of majority identity presenting clients tell me that in particular, where they show up in places and people talk about church and going to church on Sundays and all of their community events that they do with their church friends, and they're just sort of like shrinking into the background, like they don't have anything to add because they don't have that, but they also don't want to out themselves as somebody who doesn't belong to a church, because down
Yeah.
here, like where we live, it can be a I don't know, a drawback. It can be a black mark, a check mark against you.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting, yeah. All right, let's give it a little bit of history, psychological relevance. So I found some psychologist authors from the last, going back about 70 years, actually, the earliest one. Irving Goffman wrote a book in 1959, called The Presentation of
It's a good
Self in
year.
Everyday Life. Good year for that Cabernet, but also that shit. No, shut up, Sean. So what actually really resonate with me on this is that he talked about he introduced the idea of social interaction as theater, which obviously I'm a theater kid from way back, but talked about how we perform different roles. And we use this in so many different ways in psychology and also just in everyday life, but we perform different roles depending on the context, and we shift our masks to manage the impressions that we make on people. So
Yeah.
he used this lens, this sort of dramaturgical lens, to show that masking and code switching are not fringe behaviors, that everybody does it, and it's sort of fundamental to how we navigate our social lives. It really normalized the practice, but then also kind of threw into a sharp relief, like questioning like how often do we do it, and how much freedom do we have when we actually do choose a mask in this situation or that situation. So really great lens, really great frame, and then also really important questions,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. So another one, from this one's from the 90s, actually, Beverly Daniel Tatum was her name. And I actually remember when this book came out because there was some buzz around this. I was a college kid at the time,
Mm.
and really taking my humanities courses and my psychology courses. And I remember hearing about this book. It was called "Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria?"
That is a
So
bold title,
it really is like,
especially for 97.
right?
Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I think that's why it really sort of ignited some social commentary, right? It
Yeah.
caught the ear of, a lot of just anyone who was paying attention, really. But
Right.
she explored racial identity, which obviously is an issue in our country and has been and continues to be. But ex- explored racial identity development and the necessity that a lot of people of minorities feel to code switch in navigating white dominated spaces.
Mhm.
She was illustrating about how that often arises from systemic pressures and not personal preference. So this is in a sharp contrast to the Goffman book, right? Where he's talking about the choice. And when we choose to do these things, this was out of necessity. This was out of, I'm in a white dominated space, but I don't feel like I can navigate this safely or appropriately. And so I have to put on a mask, right?
Right.
So that was really highlighting the protective and honestly, the like exhausting aspects if you're doing this constantly, of adopting speech and different behaviors and just presenting to fit these dominant cultural expectations. I've definitely
Mhm.
had clients of color who have told me about the different ways that they do this, or learned to do this at an early age, and now it's an automatic. And so a piece of this, and I think we'll kind of get into this a little bit more too, but the cost of, talk about this with my queer clients a lot, but also with any client of minority identity, the cost of constantly code switching, of constantly not feeling like you can show up as your authentic self, is oftentimes there's like a direct correlation to depression.
Oh, for
because
sure.
because what we're doing, and I know you know this, but like what we do when we continually do that is we invalidate ourselves, right? We
Mhm.
shoot ourselves down, we hide ourselves, we tell ourselves, "This part of me is not okay. This part of me is not okay." Even though that part of you wants to show up in that natural, authentic way, I can't do that. I can't do that. I can't do that. And so that ends up internalizing all of this sort of self-hatred or self-dislike, and it turns into uh, depression a lot of times. You've seen this too?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like, clients that I have worked with,
Mhm.
have mentioned the whole experience of being the model minority
Oh,
and,
oh yeah. Oh, let's get
and
into that too.
how,
Yeah.
especially if you are somebody that you can't conceal your
Mhm.
othered identity, that's just at least I can try and like walk a certain way, talk a certain way,
Sure.
maybe for my own minority aspects. But if you are Black or Latino or Asian or South Asian or whatever, like
Oh yeah.
anything,
Mhm.
you're standing out differently. And
Yeah.
that is hard when especially depending on where you're at geographically, there are people that will treat you differently because they almost if it's a primarily white population,
Mhm.
I think it then depending on their exposure, they might be like, hopefully unintentionally, but still kind of ogling at a person
Mhm.
that isn't white.
Right.
And like that's just trying to go to the grocery store. And that happens to these
Right.
people all the
Right.
time.
Yeah.
And like that so how do you not get a uh god damn it, what's the word I'm looking for? Like
A complex? Like
complex, yeah.
yeah,
How
like
do you
feel
not get a
uncomfortable all the time?
complex?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
from just knowing, like, you walk in and people are naturally gonna look at you anyway, right? Like, that's something
Mhm.
we all have to combat with anxiety is
Sure.
we hear someone come in, we're gonna look over, and then usually return to our business. However, if
Right.
someone presents differently than what norm maybe that we have expected, depending on various factors of who we are in our the context in which we're in, some people might keep looking longer, and
Right.
there's a visible difference, and a lot of times faces don't have "Oh, we're
Filters.
so happy you're here." And if anything, it's either the, like, cold, dead look of,
Yeah.
like, "Oh, who's this?" Or this, like, fake, like, this gross sort of, like, "Oh,
Like, isn't it precious that
hi."
you're here? Yeah.
Yeah, like,
Uh-huh.
it just feels put upon,
Mhm.
and so, yeah, like, it's really hard, I know, with my clients when they mention this about just never really feeling when they're in certain locations that they can maybe feel anonymous.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, I'll say too, I think even for as self-possessed, self-actualized as someone can be, someone who's the most comfortable, the most grounded in their own skin, we're still social creatures. We're still
Yeah,
wired to seek acceptance and belonging and validation from outside ourselves. Most of us do that unconsciously all the time, at least in small ways. And so
yeah,
you can be the most confident and comfortable person in your skin. And when you show up and you're getting stare after stare after stare, it starts to undermine that. It starts to
for
poke at that.
sure.
Right. And then that becomes something that you have to manage and be aware of, and then try and either engage in a way or avoid, or it's insidious, but it's also more prevalent than I think we want to admit.
Which I think in a way, like, it's funny that this is what came to me. This is just,
Mhm.
I'm definitely somebody that loves pop culture and celebrity and things like that. It just fascinates me for so many reasons. And it hit me that, like, like people, when they become a celebrity who are well known, they have to be ready for when the minute I step outside, there's people looking at me and gawking and noticing me and
I
maybe
can't even
whispering.
imagine. Yeah.
Well, but that's the thing. So you are getting at least a microdose version of that if
Yeah.
you are someone of a marginalized population that physically can't conceal that.
Right.
Is you step outside and people see different. And
Right.
while it's like with animals, like, I think about if I see, like, a really cute cat and it's different than any other cat I've seen, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's so cool." But
Yeah.
why is it for a lot of people, they go, "Danger?" Like
Right.
that's the
Difference. Yeah.
worst
Hmm.
the worst, not intentions, but the worst assumptions that can
Yeah.
come up from
Hmm.
human beings is danger if they see somebody that looks different from them,
Hmm.
and which I don't know if that's something that's biologically what we've always been like as
Yeah.
humans, or if that's something that is just developed over time and bigotry and, all kinds of evil forces that have
Yeah.
created this narrative of other equals bad unless it subjects itself to me.
It actually is. Like, I don't wanna speak out of turn or try and tell you your business, but there actually is research around this, and there is some evidence that points to this is a biological wiring. At our basest recognition of other faces, we light up when we see people who look like us, and
Sure.
we shrink back, and we get afraid, and this is not a conscious process, right? But it is just an animal instinct. Different equals danger.
Ugh.
And so I know it's tough. It's a tough thing to know that, but
Yeah.
that's why we have prefrontal cortexes and education, and we can decide to push against that instinct and go, no, not danger, friend, right? Or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Or
yeah. So there
innocent
is.
person just living
It's a
their
field
life
of
just
research.
like me. Yeah.
Right, right. But it is a field of research. Actually, it's really interesting. It could be a whole other. Could be a whole other
Yeah.
episode. All right, let's move on. I got one more psychologist to talk about. This one's from just a couple of years ago, Devin Price. Wrote a book called Unmasking Autism. So writes about masking in neurodivergent and queer communities. And as you and I know, the Venn diagram of those communities is
Mm.
pretty dang heavy. There's a lot of
Extremely.
overlap between, neurodivergence and queer communities. But but Price emphasizes how masking can become an almost unconscious survival skill, like we've been talking about, right? But that the toll it takes. And here's some of the key things I think it really stands out. So burnout, having to
Mhm.
mask continually, constantly in like a work environment can contribute to burnout. I don't want to show up here anymore. This is taking too much out of me. I don't really care. I don't want it, right? A loss of identity, which is something that we talked about a little bit, right? Where I have to continue to push this part of myself aside. And so now I don't align with it in a healthy way anymore.
Mhm.
And then also mental health strain, like we said, kind of equals depression sometimes. So Price was also validating the necessity of this in hostile, like we talked about, or unsafe environments. So I feel like it's a real like invitation, I guess, to talk about the cost of the sustained inauthenticity
Yeah.
that we so many of us have to do so often, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's tough. But I love that that is so like it's so relevant and it's so now and it's so just 3 years ago and yeah, it's we're doing it and it's taking a toll on us individually
Yeah.
and communally. So, yeah, it's good stuff. So, what do you ever explore with clients like where masking is useful? Like at what point does it become harmful? I feel like this is an interesting thing to navigate or to explore with clients who I know are having a difficult time showing up authentically or living out right as a queer person. Like
Yeah.
this particular intersection, they're like, yeah, but over here at work, like I don't talk about it, and then but in these other environments, I do talk about it, and so then I might investigate like what's the toll at work, right? And what's the
Yeah.
toll? Like, how is that extending into other things? But what do you think? Like where does it tip over from protective into harmful?
That's really hard. I think there, at least in my mind, there isn't a clear, definitive place. I think it varies from person to person,
Sure.
and it's their level of comfort, their level of life lived, their ease in which they socialized,
Hmm.
in general, and I think that's so. Those are determining factors. Plus, also maybe the stakes that are involved. to make sure they show up a certain way, to fit
Sure.
in a certain way, to get, be a part of a certain culture that, maybe asks for something that feels more straight laced and formal versus free and expressive.
Yeah.
And that is, that varies so much. Yeah. So I don't know if I can really pinpoint that, but I'm curious, do you feel like you have an idea of like what that looks like for some of your clients that you've worked with?
Yeah, it definitely varies from person to person, obviously, and the extent to which, but then also how well resourced that person might be, right? They may
For
feel
sure.
like they can be their authentic selves in 99% of their life, but then in this one area, they have to kind of like tone it down or
Hmm.
whatever. And that is livable. That is acceptable, right? They can manage that. The stress, the resource strain is just not overwhelming, overbearing. Um, that's I think if I'm going to use a litmus test in that way for that particular thing, that's where I would explore like at what point is this not sustainable?
Yeah.
At what point do you feel like you are using more resources than you would like to use in order to hide those parts of yourself? And
Yeah.
then how can you either recover some of those resources or how can you avoid those situations, right? Or show up in maybe sort of like a stock way, uh, uh, um, I guess like an easily maskable character way, so that you're not having to think about right what it
Yeah.
is. I've had clients tell me like they don't necessarily want to be out or about whatever it might be, and so whenever that topic comes up at work, they will make an excuse to exit the conversation, or they
Or
will
find a way
just
to change it.
yeah, or change it, or just remain silent, or
Yeah.
whatever it might be. And so that's where I feel like we can kind of help navigate. But we're also getting into some of the takeaways, I think. So,
Yeah.
but I think just it's a great a great line to sort of delineate for ourselves is when am I spending too much resource on this, right?
Yeah. Well, and also I think depending on the career you're in, that is
Definitely,
also a part
definitely,
of
yeah,
how you might have to mask. I think for especially in more corporate cultures, there's definitely this expectation that, you have a certain energy, you speak a
mhm,
certain way, there's a welcoming vibe about it. The thing that came to me as we were talking about this is something that my sister and I have always given my mom shit for is when we were growing up and we would call her work. She had this, she worked at a bank and so it was just like, this is Linda Millhouse. And we'd be like, hey mom. And she'd be like, what do you want? Like, like it was just such a
yep.
distinctive
Company tone
difference.
versus mom
Yeah.
tone. Yep.
Yeah, it's like even her voicemail, like, I used to be able to recite it, like, word for word, like, "You
Uh-huh.
reached the voicemail of Linda Millhouse. I'm unable to take your call right now, blah, 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 blah." And then, yeah, you get her and Pharrell, she's like, "I'm busy, what do you want?" Like, I'm like, "Oh, looks like I'm not
Ouch,
a cold
mom.
customer anymore, huh?"
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So but,
Yeah.
that is I mean, I also was thinking, like, in our work, we have to mask ourselves too. Like,
We
that's
do.
part of the
We do.
job. Like, I
Yep.
can't if I'm having the worst day ever, I
Mhm.
try my best not to
Mhm.
look like it. But there are definitely times where I've noticed my clients will be like, "You okay?" And I'm like, "Oh shit." Like
Yep.
I need to straighten
Yep.
the mask out a little bit
Uh-huh.
and
Yep.
like perk up a little bit because they can
Yeah.
tell I'm a little off or, maybe I'm just tired or whatever. But like also if they mention something that maybe I'm like, oh God, I really don't like that. It's not one of my things, but
Uh-huh.
like it's one of their things. And so I need to remain neutral and
Right.
mask maybe
Right.
my like, oh God, they like that or oh, they didn't just say that, did they?
Uh-huh.
Because A, I need to check my judgment at the door, but
Right.
also B, it's not gonna help with building rapport if they sense like, "Oh, he's, like, shitting on something that means something to me."
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting that that's so I was absolutely taught that tactic like in sort of graduate school training. And then in some of my internship, I think I was encouraged to be as authentic as possible in the room.
Yeah.
And so I have developed my style over the years to when I am showing something unintentionally, but showing something on my face, and I have a client that a trusted client, right? Somebody who can read it, who's known me for a long time, and they do check in like that. I don't mind being a little bit more authentic or revealing about what is going on, right? I don't make it
Mhm.
about me. It's not my session. I'm not asking for their
Right.
guidance, right? But I do sort of come clean in that moment. I'm like, yep, I'm having a hard week. I've got some bullshit happening at the house, and it's been tough, but I appreciate you checking in. Like, I know I'm probably wearing it, but I'm here. Like, what's going on with you?
Yeah.
And then I'll quickly kind of turn it towards them. But that authenticity, like you talked about rapport, that to me actually builds trust and rapport in my own style, right? My own therapeutic
Yeah.
style. So I want to be as open and upfront as I can about, oh yeah, I like that too, or you like that, and I'll say no judgment, right? But like, wow, can I get on board with that artist or that ethos or that whatever it is they're kind of
Sure.
talking about, right? Like I'll just say that, and then we just have a frank, open discussion about it. So again, my style versus whomever.
Oh, and I think too, like, that's also,
Yeah,
I think, a shift in the culture of therapy
you're right. You're
is
absolutely right.
the what I my training in the late aughts versus what maybe people are being trained now in 2025 as therapists. I don't know if it's the same sort of, I mean, we were supposed to, be neutral and don't like
Oh yeah, blank slate. That
I
was right. Blank slate, tabula rasa. That was what we were
yes.
taught. Yep. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now there was something I used to do passive aggressively because my supervisor, she one of our supervisors, she had a lot of quirks and really like some rules that were really out there, but like
Uh huh.
kind of made sense if you thought about it. And then others where you're like, are you fucking kidding me? That's ridiculous. And one of them was do not pop your knuckles. And that was even in class. And
Are
so
you
now
kidding
like there'll
me?
be times where I'm like,
Yeah,
I'm just, like, going
exactly.
to
Yeah.
town in session, like, "Ha
Oh, I
ha, ha ha ha," like
constantly do that in session. That's a habit I've had since I
it's
was 8 years old. I'm never gonna not
right,
do
but
it.
no,
Yeah.
she was so hardcore about how that is just disrespectful, and
Wow.
it's just like, it's you're not being focused and, like,
Oh,
oh,
that's
yeah, I
super old school.
imagine this was
Yeah.
before, like,
Yeah.
fidgets were a thing that were
Right.
I remember when people started bringing fidgets into the office, being like, "Oh, yeah, these things for my clients." I was like, "What? What is
Yeah.
this?
Uh huh.
These
Yep.
are these toys?" Like, and yeah, they are, but also they really help.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I went to.
so
I remember going to
that's
a.
another
Yeah.
thing I think is complicated is trying to keep up with what is acceptable, but also knowing that like, yeah, if you get to a certain part of your career and you've been doing it okay for a while, I think you
Sure.
can have a certain sense of safety of being like, okay, like I have job security because I've been doing this for a minute and I'm
Mhm.
okay at it,
Right.
and I
Right.
can let down that veil a little bit or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, how I mean, another layer to that, and I feel like this is kinda like what we're talking, maybe kinda pulling us back on track a little bit is when I'm authentic, it gives my clients the permission to be authentic.
Hmm.
And that's really like if this is an issue, if masking, code switching, if this is taking a toll, if I'm my suspicion, my theory about what is going on is that this is a piece of what's undermining their mental health, right? When I bring that into the forefront and I show up authentically and I call it out, this is my authentic self. I give them subconsciously, but I give them permission. Like you can show up just as authentically as you want here, even if it's
Hmm.
uncomfortable, even if you don't
Hmm.
do it that often, right? Even if it's
Yep.
scary or dangerous in some other situation here in this room, like the masks are off. Like let's just be real and be people with each other. That I think is really can be really healing, especially
Oh,
if this is
hugely. Yeah.
especially if it's undermining, someone's mental health. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
love that I can do that. I love that I'm comfortable doing that, and that I can show up that way with my clients, and that it's just part of my sort of natural therapeutic style.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I came up with this question kind of around like this this topic, and I think I've had a couple of clients arrive in this space. So
Hmm.
I don't know if you'll have an answer to this or not, but like what do you do if you've had this experience? What do you do when clients have masked or hidden something for so long that they don't know if the mask is real or not anymore.
Yeah, actually, when I was reviewing that question, I have
Yeah.
one client that really came to me who basically his whole life he has been he's been in a lot of precarious situations with a lot of really tough scenarios that he's lived through. And he really, as a survival mechanism, absolutely became that person of like, I'm the life of the party and I like this and I like that. And just like, really try to be, I think, as much of a populist in the sense of how they approach people. But
Uh,
in the last year, he's done a lot of work on himself. He's gone through some major changes and he's really had to go through ups and downs of like, that's not who I am. Like,
yeah.
I don't relate to that person. I feel
Huh.
exhausted by that person. I'm now having to back away from people and things because I did them because I thought that that's what I needed to do. But now I'm realizing I don't like that at all. But I just told
Yeah.
myself I needed to in order to get by and make connections. And
Wow.
now that they feel a sense of safety and like strengthen themselves, they're they're starting to shake that off, that
Yeah.
fake veneer. And that has definitely been really interesting to watch because some of it is them trying to figure out, okay, wait, is this actually something I don't like? Or am I just like going through transitions and this is like me maybe feeling like angst in myself
Sure.
versus no, this is definitely not a part of who I am. And when I get through the angst part of this difficult terrain, I will probably return to that as one of the things that feels true for me too.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Gosh,
I think
that's
well, especially I feel like quarter life crises and midlife crises like
mhm.
really help those
Mhm.
things come forth.
Oh, yeah.
And so that to me, I think is where you really do go like, oh, why have I made this such a huge part of my identity when I really break it down? It's not really the person I subscribe to anymore. And
Mhm.
it's wearing on me to keep acting like it is.
Yeah.
That's really it's hard to see, but it's also incredible to see the, like, perseverance to try and figure that out.
That's what was really remarkable about that story is that overcoming the
Mhm.
realization, the work towards. Do you feel like you helped facilitate that, or was that something that they arrived at just on their own?
I mean, I definitely think they were because of how rough other things that they were going through were in terms of learning how to adjust to certain new normals in their life, I think they were already primed to no longer have the energy to keep that up.
Mhm.
And so then the work came about me facilitating that process of challenging certain parts of that
Yeah.
or deepening the well what does that mean then
Yeah.
what do you feel like if no one was around and you were doing exactly what made you truly joyful and no one had any say in it
Yeah.
except for you,
Yeah.
what would that be?
Right.
And to really lean into that, like, who are you when you're by yourself?
Right.
And do what you love instead of when you're around other people, this is what I need to do in order to fit in or have my have a community. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that happens a lot just speaking from our queer community is there's a lot of tropes about what gay guys do or don't like or do like that
Yeah.
not everybody subscribes to in our
Right.
community, but popular culture can sometimes create this narrative of, yep, this is what it means to be a gay dude. You like this, you don't like that, you prefer this, you don't prefer that. When we're just like everybody else, we have all kinds of preferences and likes and dislikes.
Yeah. You just reminded me of something. So I take a very similar approach, right? About like who are you when you're by yourself? But I watched something recently, and I cannot remember the context, the show or the movie or whatever it was. But I believe the actor's name is John Hurt. He's an older British actor, and it
Mhm.
was like the audience on screen was watching him as a one person play, and
Mm.
some of the verbiage that he was saying, he was like, if you were the last person on earth, who would you be? Right? If who you were didn't depend on anyone else's feedback, anyone else's judgment, anyone else's interpretation or perspective, who are you at your core? And then the character in the movie, the advice was find out who that person is and fall in love with them.
Mm,
Because and that really resonates. It gives me chills to say it like that. But
yeah.
the whole point was fall in love with yourself, because that is the person that you will have to spend the most amount of time with in your life. And I was like, oh, like I'm so like so poignant, so relevant, right? So that's what I hope. I think like if I'm thinking therapeutically, like I'm hoping to help clients to strive towards that. And while that might be idealistic and a little bit Pollyanna, it's definitely like a goal to try and integrate as much of ourselves and find out as much about ourselves as we can, so that we can really continue to uh, evolve that love for ourselves.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I would strongly argue that when you do that, that's actually when you attract the people that you really belong with, and they belong with you, you belong with them. Like,
Amen.
I mean, we have to belong to ourselves, as good old,
As
Brene
Brene would
says,
say. Mhm.
is, you have to belong to yourself first. And once you do that, it does change the frequency you're putting out. And that means you're then finally attracting people that dig that. And people get really scared about, well, who's going to maybe not come along for that journey of
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
as much as I say, like, yeah, that's going to hurt, you also don't want somebody who's there for a version of you that isn't real. That
Right.
means they're not there for you. They're there for this
Right.
caricature that
Mhm.
you've created for various reasons.
Gosh,
So,
if I could tell all of the chronic people pleasers that particular thing and have it
yeah,
land in their bones, that would be that would be it.
yeah.
You're
Oh, if I
right.
could tell that to myself in high school, if I could
Oh,
have
sure. Yeah.
every person throughout
Yeah.
from middle school on
Mhm.
here that you will actually be your happiness and find
Mhm.
your people, your tribe, your whatever you want to call it, by being the weird, loud, like excited,
Yep.
enthusiastic, in love with yourself person,
Yep.
like that, your life will change and it'll be great.
What have I been telling you for the last 4 years since I've known you? That I
To
love
brush my
how
teeth.
much
No, just
yes.
kidding. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Sean, lunch again, seriously. That I love how much you love things.
Mm,
You light up. You are your best self when you love the things that you love in your authentic way,
yeah,
right?
I do.
So,
I love
yeah,
loving things. I really do.
yeah, right. The
I can't
way
help it. It
the
bursts out from me.
amount, the intensity, it's infectious, right? It's magnetic. People want to be around you. They want to join in that intensity that you have about things. So it's yeah, I'm just all I'm doing is echoing your point, because I
Oh,
think you
thanks.
illustrate it. You illustrate it really well.
And it's hard to get yourself to that place when you
It
do
is
have all those various thoughts of self-protection and fitting
yeah,
in and blah blah blah. But yeah, like I definitely know my life is richer when I can lean into those things you're mentioning.
for sure. Yeah. All right, so let's give folks some reflections, some things to maybe take away and think about when, if this is a thing, if this is feel like something that they contend with on a regular basis. So I like to normalize this. Everyone
Mhm.
wears masks. Everyone code switches. The stakes are higher maybe for people in marginalized or minority groups, right? But we all do this to fit in, to grease the social wheels, to feel a sense of acceptance or belonging. But when it becomes taxing, overbearing, overburdening, this is when we know we have to step back. So if we do need to step back, we need to ask ourselves, like, where do I feel safe enough to take the mask off? And this actually makes me think of I'm sure you've listened to it or you're about to listen to it. The most recent Good Hang episode with Rachel
Oh,
Dratch.
with,
Have you listened, Rachel Dratch?
I haven't yet. Now I'm
Dude.
behind.
Okay, I won't spoil it, but
Okay.
one of the things that they both talk about, like about each other, is they can show up in whatever way they need to show up with each other, and it doesn't matter. There is zero judgment if they're having a bad day, if they're down in the dumps, if they are over the moon excited. Like they can both, and this is something that they appreciate about each other, is in their friendship, they can do this for each other and with each other. I think
Yeah.
that's really special. Like I feel like we have some of that at the collective, right? Where we can just show up and we can be, we're there, but we're just not our best selves that day, and there's no judgment about that. Like
Sure.
that's really special. That's really powerful to be able to be authentically emotional and not have any sort of judgment or rejection. That's what we're all sort of afraid of, is that judgment and
Hmm.
rejection, right? So
Right.
that's what I would ask everyone to ask themselves. Where do I feel safe enough to take the mask off? And can you spend more time there? Or can you help recreate some of the safety or some of the environmental elements in other places in your life so that you can take the mask off a little bit more often, right? Or a little bit more
Mhm.
freely, if you will. And then
Can I
maybe,
add to
yeah, go ahead.
oh,
Yeah,
I'm
please.
sorry.
Yeah,
No, I was
please.
just gonna say, like, the to do that, to get there, I think a huge part of that is really, like, when you're thinking about it, think about when it feels easiest to be
Mhm.
around people.
Yeah.
That to me is the ultimate key that I notice is if I just feel no qualms. I'm not thinking about my next sentence. I'm not thinking about how I look, how I am, coming off. I'm just there. I'm fully
Uh-huh.
present and
Yeah.
I'm just in the moment. That is a great sign for me that I must feel a relative amount of safety
Yeah.
and ease in that dynamic. So for all you out there listening, just really think about it. When you get around other people, think about the people where it just is effortless and know that
Uh-huh.
that's usually a great place to start to really go, oh, who am I when I'm feeling my most effortless?
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. That's a great filter, a great check-in. One other sort of reflection, and this one might be a little bit more difficult to do on your own, and so maybe with a therapist or maybe with a best friend or maybe even just as a journal, right? It's something you can think about. But I do this with my clients sometimes. I will ask them like, what parts of themselves do they consistently hide? But what would it feel like to reveal them?
Yeah.
And sometimes I can offer the safety and the space in session, but then also I might encourage them to be like, try this with your dog first. Or,
Yeah.
right? Or try this with a best friend first, or try this with your mom first. Or what would that be like to be that person more often? What would that feel like? And I
Yeah.
think that kind of speaks to exactly what you're talking about, right? Like that feeling of authenticity, that is healing in itself. I know that from personal experience, but I've also witnessed it dozens and dozens of times in my clients when they reconnect with and allow themselves to express or just show up in more authentic ways. It's like they blossom.
Yeah.
It's
Always.
incredible. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
incredible. So yeah, so those are just some great, I think, really good sort of reflections and reminders about this particular topic. So
Hmm.
cool.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
All right. You have a secret question for me, and I am ready for it.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't know if I
Whatever it is.
am.
I don't know what it is, but you tell me.
Shit. I
Mm.
will full transparency, forgot about this part. Um,
Oh, okay.
but I can do this. What do you think if you don't mind being, getting a little personal, what
Sure.
do you think was the last real mask that you took off in your own life
Whew.
that has made a big difference for you?
Wow. Um, yeah, this is a good one. I don't know if it was the last one, but the one that's coming to mind most readily
Mhm.
was is I guess it's something maybe you encouraged from me in our workspace, and I think it was to show up in a more, well, I mean, generally like a more authentic way, but to show up and have fun, like to be silly, like, and I know maybe we've even talked about it in an episode or two, but that shift for me, I think, really shifted my approach to work into our collective and my relationships and how we're for anyone listening who doesn't know, like we have a collective of therapists, and so we are in this really sort of almost undefined but really uncommon um professional workspace where we genuinely love and care for one another and show up for one another and hang out with one another. And we also have a professional ethos about us and sort of a decorum that we do maintain on some level. And I think my own work experience in the past informed like this is work, quote unquote work. So I have to be professional and I have to show up in this particular way. And I have 12 years of management experience. And so I'm going to show up and this is my most professional self. Right. And that was stiff and stale and wasn't allowing me to connect as thoroughly and as authentically. And so with some encouragement and some friendship from you and some, I guess, just experimenting, I was able to drop that and be more my silly self or whoever I might be that day. Um, and that was received better, more, I don't know, more thoroughly, more
Mhm.
completely, I guess. Um, but I feel like the results were, or the difference it made in my relationships with you and with everybody else, like it's been pretty significant. So that's a big
Yeah,
one that I
that's
can think
great.
of. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about for you? In all fairness,
Oh,
you get to turn it
no.
around.
I know. I know. I always forget that part,
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah.
then I'm like, "Oh,
Mm.
damn."
Well, here, I've got I can ask maybe a different version of this if you want.
Okay, yeah, sure.
So so if you could take off, and this might be maybe this is more revealing, but if you could take off all your masks tomorrow, what would people
Okay.
learn about you?
Hmm. That's tricky
Mm,
because it's hard for me to differentiate, I think, masks from also, I talk a lot about like not necessarily wanting to feel like I'm oversharing or
sure.
like, even though like I definitely I'm opinionated as hell. I There'll be
What?
certain parts of myself. Shut up.
You're such a
There'll be
shy
parts.
wallflower.
I hate you. Um, yeah, I don't know. Oh,
It's a tough one.
that's
That's definitely a tough one.
it
Yeah.
is because
Yeah.
it's like, when I think about myself, I definitely think I it's really hard because like there'll be times where it's like, well, gosh, if I didn't have all my masks on, I probably wouldn't be necessarily as cheerful as I can want to be because like
Mm,
that's where I think like when we're talking about when can masks be a good thing is that there is, I think, a lot of times a need to put on the happy face and fake it till you make it.
sure.
And that sometimes it's by acting it out that you kind of end up becoming it. And
Mm,
so I appreciate that part because like I can definitely, my tendency, if I don't moderate it, is I can, really get seduced by sadness
sure.
and
Be
by
a
the
little dark and
overwhelm
gloomy.
of
Yeah.
lots of hard stuff that's going on in the world and how I feel about it and where my place is in it. And
Yeah.
so there's a part of me that's like, well, gosh, if I was completely unmasked, I'd just be this like sad, melancholy zombie at points. But I also know like that's not me all the time. So like that just kind of varies
Yeah.
depending on how I'm doing. So I guess I would be even more a mess, and I say mess lovingly, but
Mhm.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm not satisfied with my answer. I might need to sit with it and really
Okay.
think
Sure.
about it. But I think it's a great question for anybody listening to really think about is
Yeah.
how that
If you
would,
could take them all off, who would you be?
yeah,
What would people see? What would people learn?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's a good one. Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Fair
Think,
enough.
thanks a lot.
Hey,
That was
I
that
feel
was
like
so
this is
much
a really
fun.
this is a really vulnerable topic, I think, for a lot of people. And
Yeah.
so questions around this about how we show up in the world, like they get really down to the root of a lot of our fears about
Hmm.
acceptance and rejection. So to really even just these thought experiments, like these questions that we're asking, even these can be a little bit activating of those fears, right? We start to push, scratch against them, and we're like, oh shit, what would that like? That's yeah. So I feel like even just your difficulty answering is probably resonating with a lot of people who are listening.
I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's great.
Welcome.
It's great. Yeah.
Welcome to the disappointment.
Well, how about we shout out? What do you got
Yeah,
this week for shout outs?
for sure. Yes. So two that are essentially connected. I want to shout out one of my besties, Sarah, who came down last weekend and we listened to the new Taylor Swift record, Life of a Showgirl, together, which is the other
Mm,
part of the shout out. And we
sure.
just had the best time. We just really caught up. It was one of those, like, when, talking about not having masks on, she's absolutely one of the people I feel safest with, period, full stop.
Mm,
Um,
love that.
because we've known each other for 20 years now,
Yeah.
and which is wild because I'm 15, but
Right. Yeah. Uh,
but
some part of you is, some part of me is for
yeah,
sure. Yeah.
that's true. And so, yeah, like I can be I can be my most slobbish, lazy,
Mhm.
like, ridiculous, silly part of myself, but I can also, like, we can be each other's hype people, and we both love Taylor Swift, and we both just deeply, deeply enjoyed listening to it together for the first time, the new album, and so it really is just the full extent of, like, full joy, full vulnerability, and just true
Wow.
acceptance of each other. And
That's
I
really
just,
special.
when I get that with somebody, it really, I mean, like, several times I was like, why this would be like, we're like, I wish we lived in the same town again, but also be super dangerous if we did, because like, I just think we just probably get in trouble for not, like, being more responsible in our lives, because we'd be like, well, we want to hang out and not do anything adult, like, she gets to escape her kids and
Yeah.
I just get to, like, be with my one of my best friends. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's my shout out.
I love that. No, that's really cool. That's a really special experience, and that you had that with her is amazing.
Yeah, I feel lucky.
Um, yeah. Yeah, it was this topic maybe reflect a little bit and actually think similarly or identify similarly of I just like I think I want to shout out like all the people who love me for everything that I am. The there's precious few of those people in my life, but the more of myself I reveal to them, the more they continue to show up and accept me and love me for those things. And that is like, it's like the best feeling ever.
Yeah,
So, and they probably all listen to this podcast. So I love all of you for loving me. Like, that is such a special gift to be given. So it's going to make me cry
that's
if I keep
awesome.
talking about it. And then my other shout out is for, I know this was, we have to loop pop culture back in. Apple TV is fucking killing it right now. Like, the morning show, probably the best. This
Uh,
past week's episode, probably the best episode that they've had so far. Slow Horses, season 5, right back on track. God bless Gary Oldman for his Jackson Lamb. I just love that character. And Invasion is back. For anybody who likes sci-fi and aliens and like cool stuff like that show is now back on as well. And so I feel like I have a glut of excellent television to watch right now, which is just amazing. But the last thing, the other one, and I told you about this one just recently, is a book that I read. Rebecca Kwong, she writes under the name R.F. Kwong. She wrote a book called Babel, and it is just this incredible, like, fictional historical tale for anybody who likes language and, I guess, British history, or like, it's really, if it's a fictional tale, it's got a little bit of a hero bent or whatever to it, but like, man, is this thing just rich in history, rich in imagination, rich in even just this piece of magic that she weaves into all of these accurate historical events, like it's just so freaking cool. Like, so great job, Rebecca. Like, that's a fantastic book. It's called Babel or Babel, however you want to say that. I would totally highly recommend it. It's so great.
Awesome.
Yeah, cool.
Cool.
Thanks, Sean. That was honestly one of the most satisfying episodes I think that we've done together.
Wow.
I really love this topic. I think it's really important. It affects all of us.
Yeah.
And so to kind of air it out a little bit and make it real, and then help people just reflect a little bit and maybe overcome some of their fears, or just feels important to me. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool.
Cool
All right.
beans.
Well, thanks. And thanks everybody for watching and listening. And until next time, we want to invite everybody to take a breath, and
Collect your thoughts.
thanks everybody. We'll see you next time.
Bye.